Modern day farming allows for crops to be grown at almost any time of the year. This barley crop, growing in northern Wales in the United Kingdom, is not going to be ready until the end of August. The biblical perspective of these first fruit crops means that we've got to go and see wild barley actually growing in the situation in Israel. The Abib search from the year before had been hot and dry. We were looking forward to more of the same. The growing conditions, though, are unpredictable, and that is the point of a search. Nothing can be taken for granted. We were expecting the barley to be advanced enough to declare an early beginning to this year, but instead we arrived during Jerusalem's worst snowstorm for 40 years. As always, our first job, though, was to get our supplies from the market. The first 2 days were spent on an intense study of barley, both from the technical, biological point of view and the biblical. Ruth Ann is a professional agronomist, while Nehemiah is a Hebrew scholar working at the Hebrew University.
I got this one. I printed another one and it started turning blue. I was apparently running out of yellow.
Which is this? Which is it's not D. It's something between C and D.
Like hard dough.
It's a hard dough.
Yeah.
And then a week after that, then it's going to be this D, probably.
Yeah.
And then that D, this hard stuff, which is crunchy, that's what you're going to bring for the Omer offering.
So I don't understand where we disagree.
Because you're okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying that you do gain in terms of
dry matter.
Yeah. Dry matter weight.
In other words, you'll get a better barley grain if you leave it on the stalk from the 40% stage until the final 10% stage than if you cut it off at the 40% stage.
Right. Because here your kernel's going to shrivel slightly, get kind of skinny, get kind of...
Shrivel up.
That's right.
No point in putting energy into it.
You're just wasting your energy to keep those leaves green. So as they produce their last little bit of photosynthesis and send it up to the head, they just begin to die. Your main energy is coming from the flag leaf, from this green peduncle, which is your last joint, and from...
Here, because the barley is growing so much earlier than when it would grow back where I live, the extremes in temperature that you have between day and night obviously plays a huge role in this, a huge role.
Right.
And
so it is taking longer.
Yes, it is. Let's go over to Leviticus 2. And this is a learning thing here.
On day 3, it was our first chance to see what stage the barley was at. We visited a national park dedicated to preserving Old Testament traditions of cultivation. The expression Abib is an agricultural term. It describes the barley head at the earliest point in time that it is ready for harvesting. If the kernels are roasted or left to dry, it could be ground to a meal. In all instances in the Hebrew, it is written as the Abib, the time when the barley becomes ripe.
Right here, this is where I said if I had a knife or longer fingernails, I could do this. But we'll look at the embryonic head inside the sheath. They produce grain, probably one for sure. This one will probably not make it before this one ripens and the lower part of the plant starts to die as this one
The
starts
park
to
also
ripen,
had
so
plenty of biblical
it may
farm
be imported.
implements like this original water pump
Yeah,
based
your
on the
largest,
Archimedes
tallest one is
screw.
usually your main one, you can tell.
And of course the ever-present olive grinding stones.
We
want to see it on the ground. Take it out.
Samson. So like you got the mush.
Oh.
You got some of the things that you did yourself? Wow. Okay, it's a very wide subject how they pronounce
More classroom work followed, where it was impressed on us the importance of barley as the first crop of the season, and also how tenacious it was being able to grow under almost any condition. The expression first fruit refers to barley being the first crop of the year available. The park had a good restaurant serving food exactly as it would have been in King David's time. A visit to the River Jordan had visions in my mind of a placid stream with kingfishers just dipping into the water. However, the reality in Israel is of two seasons, the rainy season and the dry. There isn't a spring or an autumn or fall. In the wet season, the winter, the Jordan is well and truly in flood, which explains the references to Israel having difficulty crossing it. Once again, we were visiting places on our route from the previous year to build up some records. But what a difference! We are almost within sight of the ancient city of Jericho in one of the drier, hotter parts of Israel. And what appeared to us as desert last year is now lush and green with sandy creek beds left over from floods. But still no Abib barley.
By the road is not true. By the road isn't, but we found some spots in it.
This is how the same bush we were standing next to appeared a year ago. It was extremely hot and dry. This area was also in what is now known as the West Bank, and our host thought it wise to have guards and a bomb-proof bus.
Still stuck inside.
Okay. Are these edible plants, by the way?
No.
The whole countryside was very green from the cool weather and plentiful rain. In this valley last year, there were Bedouin children picking a very ripe tomato harvest. Moving on again to another site where we found Abib barley the year before, it would appear that it was a popular spot for barley. Someone else was after it and doing a good job too. Throughout the entire Bible, the plan of salvation is patterned on the harvests in the land of Israel. The feasts, the new moons and Sabbaths, they hold the key to understanding what is in store for us. The feasts, or more accurately the set appointed times, are rehearsals for the future reality. There are many versions of calendars, but only one biblical one. The new moon and the barley crop, they're the tools to determine the new year. The Abib barley provides the spring season, while the visible new moon establishes the exact day. time for a break. Some of the team went to the mud baths at the Dead Sea, while Gerald and I went to En-Gedi, the secret hiding place of David, while on the run from Saul. Deep in the desert next to the Dead Sea, it has never been known to dry up. If there is to be any chance of finding ripened barley in the Abib stage, it will be on the edge of the Negev desert in southern Israel. That is the hottest, driest area where crops can grow. If we don't find it there, it'll certainly mean that the next new moon, due in a few days, could not declare the new year, as an extra month would have to be added.
I'd say it was אביב. כן, זה אביב, אבל זה אחד. אז עכשיו נחפש עוד.
It has just bloomed here again, are the anthers that have just shed off, so this would not be Abib yet.
As we travelled around, some of the few visitors that were in Israel that we met joined us, interested to see what we were doing. But this day, however, we were joined by Karaite Jews learning for themselves how to establish the biblical calendar.
Well, it's stressed because it's got a small head. Something happened here, but it is Abib.
אתה רואה? זה מנקודה אחת. שלוש. או משלוש עד חמש. עד חמש. עד חמש. משלוש עד חמש. זה לא שורות. זה ההבדל?
These two decided it was not Abib. There were some stalks that were advanced enough, but not nearly sufficient for a wave sheaf offering. That meant that this next new moon would not be the beginning of the new year. There was only one more place to try that constituted Israel in Old Testament times, the other side of the River Jordan. Today this is the nation of Jordan, and very different to Israel, which by comparison is a modern Western nation.
It's like a bit, that's all it is. Okay. But it's really the case.
These scenes are on the main highway running north-south to Amman, the capital. There was very little in the way of modern facilities, not much in the way of fridges or freezers. Business was mostly conducted as it had been for many hundreds of years. It doesn't prevent them, though, from having fresh meat and produce. Well, our friends had beaten us again. There were livestock in the streets, in the houses. Donkeys and camels were still being used to carry people and goods. But what barley they left us was still at a very, very early stage. Jordan may have seemed backwards to Western eyes, but despite the fact that the Iraq War was just starting nearby, the people were friendly, and the children were the same as all children. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, the new moon was expected to be visible, so we headed back.
seeing it? Is it getting clear? I pointed him in exactly the right direction. Look, binoculars nicely, but it's not. No, it's not.
The new moon is not always easy to see.
I'm looking for it with the naked eye now. I got it with the naked eye. There, it's slightly to the left of the antenna, very slightly to the left. This is not the colour. This is
To look for it, wait for the sun to set on the expected evening,
Oh, I see it.
and almost half an hour after the sky has darkened, the thin crescent of the moon will be following behind it in the sun's path going down. And the crescent moon will have the two spikes, the two horns pointing upwards. Dr. Roy Hoffman, in this following interview, makes reference to the Hillel calendar, currently in use by the Jews. It was instituted in approximately 350 AD because the Jews and the Sanhedrin could no longer stay in Jerusalem. Now they wish to move back to the original and biblically correct way. But as he says, forming a Sanhedrin is the problem.
My name is Roy Hoffman. I'm from the Hebrew University. I'm also a mainstream Jew. I believe in Judaism, what the Karaites would call Rabbinate Judaism, but that's the Judaism that a vast majority of Jews here believe in. What we believe in, as far as our calendar is concerned, is that we go by a fixed calendar that's made up of months and years. The months go according to the moon, and the years go according to the sun. This month is the start of the second Adar, the leap month. The other thing is the months go according to the appearance of the moon, at least in theory. However, in order to fix them, there needs to be a high religious court, which we call the Sanhedrin, which doesn't exist today, and therefore our calendar is as fixed by the last Sanhedrin some 1,600 years ago. It is according to calculation. And this month actually starts this evening and happens, in this case, to appear in the same time as the new moon appeared. Most months it doesn't occur that way. The new moon usually appears a day or so later. Now, we believe that we will go back to the original method of having people go look for the moon and then bring their testimony and observations to the Sanhedrin, that's the religious high court, and they will decide whether or not the month begins after 29 days or after 30 days, because it must always be either 29 days or 30 days. Now, the thing is, looking at the moon and seeing the moon doesn't tell us when our months begin today, but in the future it will. And therefore, we first have to practice how to look for the moon, and that is not as trivial as it seems. When you first see the moon, it is very difficult to see. The months begin based on the calculations set 1,600 years ago by the last Sanhedrin, which doesn't always coincide with the visible new moon. So the question that we want to ask is, if that's the case, then just clarify, just so it's very clear, why is it that today you go out and look for the new moon? You already touched upon that, but just let's make that point very clear. Well, we should also make clear why we go according to a calculated calendar. Oh, okay, please. Why? Because once the Sanhedrin makes a ruling, we cannot go against it. And likewise, when there is a Sanhedrin, they say they don't accept the testimony, even though everyone saw it, we still delay the new moon by the start of the month by 1 day.
What's necessary for that?
So that's part of the same question. What's the Sanhedrin and what would be required to have?
Okay, what is the Sanhedrin? It's there's more than one Sanhedrin, but the main Sanhedrin, called the Big Sanhedrin, is the high religious court. It contains 71 judges, and they have to be appointed from generation to generation, passing down. But this passing down, or smicha, passing down from generation to generation, has been broken, like 1,600 years ago. That's the chain of authority. The chain of authority has been broken. In order to reinstate the Sanhedrin, we have to have the agreement of all the rabbis in Israel, something that's very difficult to get, to pass the chain on to one judge, and then he can appoint the other 70. and further judges, and throughout the country. One more thing I have to add is that Sanhedrin would appoint a group of 3 judges in order to receive the testimony from the moon, from the observations of the moon.
And can you explain the relationship between the re-establishment of the Sanhedrin and the coming of the Messiah? Does one require the other, or vice versa?
There's no actual requirement that one... firstly, there's no requirement for a Messiah for there to be a Sanhedrin. It requires the consensus of all the rabbis. However, the chances of there being consensus between all the rabbis without a king, which is what the Messiah is, to bring them together it's difficult to imagine, but anything can happen.
This walled-up entrance is the gate that Gamaliel, who taught Paul at Christ's time, came through to announce on these steps the barley was Abib, the new moon had been sighted, the relevant witnesses had been examined, so the new year was now official. This was also where each new moon and holy day season was announced. It was the Roman general Titus that destroyed the temple, pushing some of it over this edge of the Temple Mount. The huge building stones crashed down onto this street, inflicting massive destruction to the paving. The mound of temple rubble remained until a recent excavation which revealed the actual craters and damage. Time has been frozen for 2,000 years. And that, to me, is a reminder just how little has changed. They still want to live their own lives in their own way. Eventually, there is mistrust, followed by defiance, and then the inevitable conflict. Grief and despair foster a never-ending cycle of continued hostility handed down through generation after generation. Could this crop of barley that Christ used as an analogy represent the solution? 3 weeks later, we returned to the Negev, and as expected, much of it was fully mature. And we can now carry out the most common test to judge its maturity. But first, here is a sample of wild 2-row barley and a modern 6-row hybrid. And here are the tares, many types of other grasses that spring up with the crop. By squeezing a kernel, we can discover how advanced it is. This first one is called the cotton stage, only a thin thread inside it. Next, still very early. That was called the worm stage. A gentle squeeze extrudes a soft squiggle. This one is much firmer and may have some substance if dried. But this last one took some squeezing to go anywhere. It definitely is Abib, and this will dry to be solid grain. The 7 weeks from Passover and unleavened bread to Pentecost represent the harvesting of the first fruits or first crop. Christ, pictured as the wave sheaf offering, was the first of the first fruits. Pentecost is the feast of first fruits and represents the balance of the first fruit crop joining Christ at the marriage of the Lamb. Christ continually used agricultural analogies to make a simple point. The message behind the Abib, playing its part in the yearly calendar process, focuses our attention on the goal we are all seeking in our spiritual lives, becoming the first fruits unto God and the Lamb. and after the marriage of the Lamb, bringing to this world the relief and blessings it so desperately needs.